bulk import today. And wanted to quickly note, if you do have any questions that are not within the scope of bulk import, I'd encourage you to put them in the chat. There, we are trying to prioritize anything kind of bulk import first, but if we do have time at the end, we'll really want to come help address all your questions. But as you'll see, as you've seen from the many emails and the follow-up email you'll get from me today, we do have many other open office hour sessions. So we have a whole ton these next 6 weeks. So if you're not able to get your answer today, please join us either live or send us an email at 2030commitment.com, which will be an answer for a lot as well. Right, cool. We're looking like a good turnout. Happy Valentine's Day for everyone who is celebrating. I will say this popped into my head a couple days ago, but I didn't schedule it specifically on Valentine's Day for this reason, but I'm going to say this. Even if you aren't celebrating in a traditional sense, your love letter to the environment could be to report your 2030 projects by March 31st. And because we all love the environment and hate climate change and want to do the best we can as architects to mitigate it, I expect to see a whole slew on March 31st come in.
But I think that's the new rebranding, love letter to the environment, 2030 commitment.
Yes, exactly. Great. We're gonna kick it off. I want to say I'm very happily joined by Jesse and Daniel, who are on our 2030 working group and DDX subgroup. So they are practicing architects. They know the DDX in and out and are here to help us kind of answer all your questions. And we'll pass it over to my colleague, Melissa Rancy, to kick us off.
Thanks, Ina. So I'm going to start with a little demonstration, reminding everyone where all of the pieces of bulk import exist. We'll do a little demonstration of an upload, and then, feel free to start asking questions as we go through the demonstration and after. So if there is something that you're confused with as I'm going through it, feel free to jump into the chat. My fellow colleagues interrupt me when someone does have a question, so I pause and we take a second to look at those. So, all right. So here is our DDX interface right there. So for this demonstration, we will go through first a reminder, how do you get to upload your DDX portfolio? That's not a good sign. My DDX, is my internet frozen? Oh no. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. I might be having, how could I have internet problems? I'm on the Zoom. All right. We're back. Thank goodness. All right. So as we start, we go towards company. And then we go down here, we can go to import, because we are going to import our projects into the DDX. This is where you can find the sample Excel that you can download to then personalize to upload everything. This is also a place where there is a bulk import guide. Found out yesterday, this link doesn't work. So do not try to download your bulk import guide from here. There is another place where you can get that. That is in our help pages. So if you put in bulk import here, you'll be taken to our handy dandy bulk import guide. And it will tell you all the fields that you can use and everything that is necessary to to do this upload. We are getting that link updated, but that probably won't be until the end of the week. So hopefully that will be addressed shortly, but there is another place where you can find that bulk import guide. So again, check that out in the help pages. The help pages are incredibly robust and helpful. And that search feature, you can type almost anything in and you will find what you're looking for. So make sure you check there if there's anything that you find confusing. So at this point, it's actually pretty simple. We are going to choose a file. This file is going to be this one. I named it bad, which means I'm now going to show you the ways in which you might fail a bulk import. So I've uploaded it. You can see it down here. And then I hit import. And I have caused many of the common issues that people have when they are importing a bulk import. So the office not matching the locations in your firm. If you have entered other for one of your tools, we have started requiring that you have to tell us what other is. So in this spreadsheet, I did not indicate what other is, and it will yell at you for that now. So we do need you to tell us what energy modeling or embodied carbon software you are using. And if you do say other, you are going to have to specify what other is. Another big issue, invalid date format. So I'm going to pop over to the spreadsheet in a minute and we'll look at those. Another issue, so new this year, we do have validation between the state and the zip code. So if you put in yes, that's great, Jesse. It's wonderful for our overall data. Quality is going to go up because of this. But if you have a zip code for Connecticut and your state is Arkansas, it's going to reject it. So another invalid date format, and then another other issue. So we're going to pop up here for a second and go back to the company tab. Actually, let me create another one so we don't lose our errors. But if we go to the company tab, you're going to see this handy dandy list of offices and studios. The firms or the studios in your spreadsheet need to match these exactly. So if you spell Atlanta wrong, then it will not upload that particular line. So in our spreadsheet, what did we do? We said San Francisco instead of US California, San Francisco. So if we change that to, where'd it go? US CA space San Francisco, that one should now work. So now we've addressed number one. Number two, in row 4, we didn't include an energy modeling tool for other. So we'll scoot on over here. And you can see there's other. And we would need to say, I don't actually know what tool you would be using that is not a part of our list. Our list is pretty thorough, so I can't even make up the name of the tool that you would be using instead, but I'm assuming it is valid. All right, so now we've addressed the second error, invalid date format. So this is when you are saying when the modeling was done. Where is that field? So as you can see here, the dates are done this way. This is a valid date. This is an invalid date. So if I say 2023, 0903, that should work now. Now we have in line 5 and 6, we have invalid postal codes. So let's pop back over there. Postal codes are at the beginning. All right, so this is where we have Texas, and this is a New Hampshire zip code. And now I'm going to change it to New Hampshire because I can't remember what Texas zip codes are. And then this one is a Boston zip code. It has an error because the formatting took out the 0. So make sure your formatting leaves the 0. Oh, see, it does it again. So then you would need to change that. Well, first change it to be, that's not the right format. Format cells. And it's text. And then you can add the 0 and it will remember the 0 and now be a valid zip code. All right, so now we've addressed those 2 postal code issues. We have another invalid date format on embodied carbon. Let's pop on over there. That's in row 5 as well. So as you can see there, another wrong date. And a correct date. And then we'd had no other.
Melissa, you put periods instead of hyphens in the date, so it won't validate.
You're right, it won't validate. Thank you. That's just, it's so picky. And unfortunately, that's the way I prefer to write my dates. But thank you for catching that, Daniel. Very helpful. Otherwise, we were just going to demonstrate how it's still wrong. And then we have the embodied carbon modeling tool, which is went too far. We have other here. We need to say what other is. Again, we have a pretty comprehensive list that we just updated this year, so I don't know what tool you'll be using, but let us know, because if multiple people are using an additional tool that we don't have in our list, then we will know to add it to our list next year, and then you will not have to select other again. This helps us understand the tools you all are using, what is most popular, and will help us continue to support everybody best. So we will save as. Fixed. All right, we're going to pop back into our bulk import, back up to our company. We're going to try importing again. And hopefully it works. Otherwise, this will get awkward. And I didn't fix the date properly. That embodied carbon date. I wonder what I did. Anywho, we'll go back to that. Row 5. Oh, I didn't. All right. That will work. We'll save. We'll make one last attempt. Our fixed file. And I'm going to pause here for a second because there is this other question that it asks down here, portfolio submission. So you may use bulk import file to directly submit your annual portfolio. So this is either going to upload these projects into your overall portfolio and update the projects that are there. And then you will go through the validation process inside the DDX for submitting your portfolio. Or if you are ridiculously supportive and you believe everything in this spreadsheet is 100% accurate and you do not need to include any other projects that may be in the DDX, you can submit it straight from this spreadsheet. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to then demonstrate how you can submit your portfolio after this, but I do want to let you know that is an option. If you do want to do that, you click that here, you say what your reporting year is, and it's yelling at me because I have already submitted a fake portfolio for this year. But that is also good to know. You can resubmit your portfolio. So if you submitted a spreadsheet and then you realized there were mistakes. So you submitted it in January, you were like, I'm on top of it. One of the people in your firm comes back to you and says, oops, my bad. Here's something that we need to update. You can resubmit your portfolio. And what we will get in the end is the most recent update. But if you submit this spreadsheet and then you submit a different spreadsheet and click this little button and don't have all the same projects in it, it's just going to do that last set of projects. So that is the difference in this submit button. So instead of like, if you add 3 projects, but you hit submit, then it's only going to say your portfolio is 3 projects because that is the last thing you submitted, which I do think is one of the helpful reasons of doing the portfolio submission the other way is you really have that additional double check of everything that's in there. And it also means that I know that some really large firms actually submit multiple spreadsheets. They kind of break it up into either locations or studios, types of projects. And then once those different spreadsheets have been uploaded, they then submit their entire portfolio within the DDX versus just a spreadsheet. So just want to make sure that you realize that this overrides the other spreadsheet if you do that, if you click this button. So we are not going to click this button, but you can, but just make sure you're very, very positive it's right. All right. So it is now in here. So I can go over to submit portfolio. I select my year. Yeah, I know I already submitted it. And then you can see all the projects. So this is some of the projects that were in the spreadsheet and other projects that I worked on within the DDX. And so it will give you a mix and you go through and you determine which ones are accurate and which ones aren't. So I can go through and delete anything that says test. And you kind of continue to go through the portfolio. I'm assuming many of you might have additional projects and many, many more than the small list that I have here. So then you can confirm that this is a snapshot of your company's portfolio, and you can give consent to publish if you so choose. We will still check with you before we publish any EUI from any firm. This just gives us a short list of people to follow up on for certain case studies and things. All of the projects that you uploaded will now be a part of your DDX portfolio. You can edit them in the interface. So it is in there and you can kind of edit it in other ways. So I am now processing my new submission. All right. So what do we need to clarify? What do we need to work on? What questions do we have? I see some Q&As in there.
I think Ina already answered the 2 questions that were in the Q&A.
Do you have a couple coming in as well? Can we talk about the Zero Tools bulk import today? You can apparently receive an Excel spreadsheet baselining your projects, and is this able to be uploaded to the DDX for a reporting year? And is this the information we're looking for, or should we only have buildings that ran actual energy models?
There's a lot of layers to that question. One, I don't know anything about Zero Tools bulk import. I know that, so if I pull up our spreadsheet again, there are numbers in here that you would need to acquire elsewhere, right? So Zero Tool portfolios, Jesse or Daniel, can one of you go poke and see what that link takes you to? The Zero Tool portfolios. So if you are doing bulk import, you can do projects that have energy models and you can do projects that do not have energy models. That neither is allowed or disallowed, like everything is fine. So if you only have a code, that is absolutely fine. But you do need to put in your energy baseline and that other information you can get from Zero Tool. So you would need to collect that information offline from the DDX. So saying what your energy target is, those kinds of things.
I've never used this Zero Tool for portfolios. It looks similar to the bulk upload for the AA DDX. You put in some general project information and but it just spits out a baseline. I don't see why you couldn't use this. I don't think you would be able to push this to the DDX. You'd have to manually copy those cells for your baseline PUI, but it seems like a good process. You could also just let the DDX do it if you're not doing bulk upload and you're curious about what your baseline is. If you put your use type, your square footage, your location, it'll pull from the zero tool for that individual project. So either way, however you want to get the data into the DDX works.
And to
Hope that
preface,
answers the question.
you can do some projects bulk upload and some not.
Yes.
Yes, you can do a mixture. You can do some projects bulk upload, some projects within the DDX, and some projects API. Any way you want to get your data in there, all three are valid pathways, and you can mix and match depending on what makes sense for whatever project you're working on. As you saw, the end, you go through all the projects individually as to what is a part of your portfolio. So it doesn't really matter how it gets to that page. So I hope that we answered that question about the zero tool. And if not, please let us know. All right, other questions. Our company is a consultant. And we are not allowed the AOR for projects we are involved in. Are we allowed to submit for projects that we did not design? If so, can we submit projects anonymously for privacy reasons for our clients? What is an AOR? Architect of record. Okay. Sorry. This is a better question for next year. So you can be added as a consultant for certain projects within a firm. So if a firm wanted to add you as a consultant, it would then still be a part of that firm's profile. If you did want to have projects that you do work on, you can submit them separately. All projects are anonymous, so that part is sort of every project is anonymous. We are not sharing data. I know that some firms, for an extra layer of anonymity, will put in a fake project name to make sure that it is anonymous. So rather than saying I'm working on Google headquarters, they might say office space 435 to make sure that it is not obvious as to whose office it is. And that way, even if someone saw it in the DDX, and which is staff and developers only, then we would not know what it is either. Other than that, no one will ever see anyone's projects. It's all aggregated data that is shared. So that level of anonymity is okay. Right now, we are not policing projects that are duplicated in the DDX, but it is something that we are currently working on in development to be able to allow two firms to share a project. And so that will be released later this year. In that two firms, so an architect of record and someone else, could both co-own a project, and then these projects will no longer be duplicated. And there will be a way to record like who is updating information, and then it can be a part of both of your portfolios without creating duplicate square footage within the overall database. So we're very excited about that, but that won't happen until after this reporting period is over. So submit it for now, and then when that new feature, it will actually allow you to select one of those projects from your firm or the other, and allow you to co-own that for 2024 reporting.
Hey, Melissa, can we go back to Zero Tool for a second? Because there's a follow-up
Sure.
in the chat, and this might be a question for Jesse, but like, and I might be misremembering how this works, but like in the spreadsheet on the screen, right? Because if you go and you enter a project directly in the DDX, you're not uploading it, it automatically uses Zero Tool to come up with the baseline. So if you're importing by spreadsheet, if you had a blank cell in that energy baseline column, rather than giving you an error, doesn't the DDX on upload automatically fill the baseline in based on the use types you picked? Because people are saying, like, people are saying it's seeming to indicate that that's a problem, but I think it does that. Well, let's test it, but I thought it did that.
Let's find out.
Yeah, I've
I feel like it
always
did in the
created my
past.
baselines from zero tool manually as projects are in development, and then just input that data into the spreadsheet that we're uploading to the DDX. I've never tried to leave that.
Yeah, I don't think it has worked in the past. What we've done is put sort of a placeholder and then just individually gone into those projects and in the DDX and sort of toggled
Changed
on
it
and off
later.
zero tool.
Got it.
Energy baseline can't be
Yeah.
blank.
So that might be something to ask the developer for the future, if there's a way to somehow get that automation that's happening if you go directly to work on the upload, because that would help some people out, I guess.
Yeah, that would be great. That's usually the bulk of our time
It's figuring out
in
the
the
baselines.
workflow is the baselines for projects without energy modeling.
Now, of course, just being the like sustainability like person wanting to drive performance, even though this is a reporting problem, technically you shouldn't be figuring out the baseline as you're uploading, right? Because the baseline should be researched at the beginning of the project to help the project understand what its goal should be. So like this workflow would be good for projects that are like didn't really do that and you're just trying to report your whole portfolio. But in general, as a process, right? And I have this problem in our firm too, and I just keep telling people it's useless if you don't look this up during like beginning of schematic design, right? Because how could you try to achieve 80% performance improvement over a baseline if you didn't know what the baseline was until the project was done, right? So that's part of the reason I think this wasn't prioritized as a functionality of this thing, because you kind of want to democratize the baseline in the project team's workflow. But it would be helpful for people to be able to submit their portfolio of projects where maybe people didn't do that, just from a data continuity standpoint.
Thanks, Daniel. Another question, do the colors in the Excel spreadsheet mean anything? Yes, the colors were new last year, and they are explained in the bulk import guide. So it does really talk about things that are mandatory, things that are kind of optional, and it'll go through in sort of this section. And so the spreadsheet does have that. I think it actually has in it definitely, the colors do delineate that. So check the bulk import guide for that information. Question, the bulk upload overrides the last bulk upload sheet, not the API and user inputs. So clarify on that. If you have input a project, that kind of override is really specifically for portfolio submission. So if you are using an API or user interface, you're kind of creating an instance of updating a project within the DDX. So if you do a bulk import, you are creating an instance of an updated information. So if this is a project that you had been working on last year and it has the same project number in the spreadsheet as one that was in there last year, when you upload this bulk import, it's kind of creating an updated information. And so if you upload that on Monday and then by Friday you decide it's incorrect, you will have, that will be the most recent information, the information you uploaded on Friday, but there'll kind of be two instances that you can see in the DDX. Let me show where that is. So
yeah, you'll have two submissions of design data, one for Thursday and one for Friday. But when you then submit, it'll use the most current one.
Correct. And so you can actually see these different kind of instances down here in design phase data. So every time you kind of make an update to a project, whether it be through API, through the user interface, or through bulk import, it creates kind of like a little spot, an instance, right, in this area here. And so that will have additional information. It will submit the last submitted information. But if we click that little button in the bulk import spreadsheet, it would override a different portfolio that you had already submitted. So if on Monday you submitted a portfolio and you clicked the little import everything button and you had 500 projects, and then on Friday you were really just trying to update 3 of them and you submit a portfolio and you click that little submit portfolio button, your portfolio will only have 3 projects. If that. I hope that makes, if that was more confusing, let me know. Should there be, did you have anything to add, Daniel?
I was just going to say, honestly, if we want to make it less confusing, just do the 2-step process that Melissa showed. It's the safest way to keep it open until everything is done, right? I mean, I've been bulk uploading for 5 or 6 years, and I never check the box to report it as I'm bulk uploading, because inevitably you're going to want to go back and change something. So, and Melissa, you talked about how you can bulk upload and then you could edit stuff in the DDX. So like an example of that. So we only had 5 projects across our firm of 150 last year that did carbon modeling, right? Embodied carbon modeling. So it wasn't in our spreadsheet. So I uploaded our spreadsheet, right? And then I had a list of those 5 projects with their data, and I manually went into the DDX and put the carbon data in for those projects, right? I guess I could have manually put it into the spreadsheet too, but that's just an example of the type of thing. Like if you've got some special cases that you're doing on a couple projects and not all of them, that's the type of thing you might want to go back and edit. And you wouldn't have been able to do that if you had clicked that submit as you upload the spreadsheet button.
Should there be an energy target for every project? But isn't this the EUI? A target is not your actual EUI. A target is your goal. So that could be the 80% reduction from baseline, which is theoretically everyone's target right now. So if the predicted EUI for your building is this number, the target would be 80% of that number, and then the EUI would be whatever. It is either calculated by energy code or calculated by zero tool, I'm sorry, your energy model. So those are kind of that target is whatever your goal reduction is. So some firms I do know that have a different goal than the 80%. So if you're trying to ease yourself into it and say that your firm is aiming for 50%, you can customize that, but most just stick with the 80% goal. And that is what is auto-calculated if you were in the DDX. A question about California Title 24. It is not in the bulk import guide. Oh no, I will talk to Ina about that. It is an option. You can use Title 24 Commercial 2022. If it is in the DDX, it is an option in the spreadsheet. So we will make sure that the bulk import guide reflects that update. And I apologize that that was missed.
I think Ina answered that earlier, Melissa. I think the person might have had an older version of the bulk import guide, because Ina included a link. If people go back through the Q&A, there's a link to one that she said has the 2022 in it.
Hi, can I ask the question? It was me actually, and I feel like it'd just be easier for me to ask rather than typing a bunch. So in the bulk import guide, I see the commercial code. I don't see the non-commercial version, but the non-commercial version is in the DDX. So my question is can we report using just general California Title 24 2022 code, not commercial?
Now I'm a little confused.
It's in the DDX. It's not in the bulk import guide.
Oh, as a pull down option.
Yes.
And it
Yeah,
doesn't.
Give it a shot, see if you get an error.
Yeah, so my question is if maybe it was just not included in the bulk import guide, but we can still use it. I just don't want a lot of our projects to use that code. And so I don't want to upload something and have all of them be spit back saying that it's
I would say just make sure that how it's written and the DDX is how it's written in your spreadsheet.
Okay, so if it matches exactly that, it will be fine.
It should be. Do a test
In
version
theory.
with like one project make sure
Okay.
everything else is right and see if it works. It should. And so, yeah, I would just double check that one.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All right, so we have a question from Matthew about doing bulk import for the first time, but having the capacity to manually calculate and input the information from Zero Tool for dozens and dozens of projects. Daniel, do you have any thoughts on the most efficient way to get that information and do bulk import?
So, here's what we basically do is different than everybody potentially. But some of our other big firms do this. We have our own internal version of the DDX, which was programmed to look like the DDX, but be tied into our Deltek and our CRM system. And so it uses the same scripting that the DDX uses to tell people what the baselines are at the beginning of a project, right? So we tell project teams, the beginning of a project, go in, put in your use types and areas, and it'll give you your baseline. If you don't do that through some sort of tool like that, then the workflow would be to actually have people bring up the DDX, right, as part of their design process and enter their information directly to get the baselines. Now, at the end of the day, the difference between looking at the CBEX data, 2003 CBEX data list, which you can get on the help pages, and using Zero Tool is fairly small. So if you need to quick start this, right, you could just give people the list of baselines by project type from the CBEX data, right? And if you're not using a mixed use project type, that's going to be fairly uniform across most climate zones, right? So let's say it's multifamily 5 or more units, right? And it's not mixed use, that you're going to get your baseline. Every project's going to have the same baseline. So you could just give that information to teams and say to use that. That's basically how I would do it.
Thanks, Daniel. I know somebody said that they had placeholders. I'm kind of curious as to how that worked and what you did with that. Not saying that that is a best practice or a recommended pathway.
Well, so what we've done, and I was the one who mentioned placeholders, is in the baseline in the bulk import, we just put, I forget, you had like a 1 or something and some random source for the baseline. And then we just go into, once we've done the bulk import, we go into the DDX and just go into each of those projects. And if you just toggle the Zero Tool baseline on and off, it will then update that. So we sort of get the projects in there through bulk import and then use the DDX to produce the Zero Tool baseline manually, project by project, but it is unwieldy when we have a lot of projects.
Yeah, you would save yourself a lot of time, Lee. You can use that same methodology, right? But instead of, because if you, again, the Zero Tool is super precise, but at the end of the day, if it's causing extra work, it's not worth it. Just use the list of code baselines from the CBEX, which again, you get through the help pages, which is close enough to the Zero Tool, and you could use those as your placeholders. And then you could totally avoid the toil of that manual thing, and you could just preload them into your spreadsheet as your placeholders from the beginning.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know which is faster necessarily. We have a lot of mixed use projects, so that's a lot of cross-referencing the list versus letting the API and the DDX do it for you. But
Yeah, in the past, if I had projects that didn't have an energy model, I would just use the national baseline I do a lot of K-12 work. So I knew that was a 7 baseline, a EY of 75. And so that would be my baseline. And then if I actually created a baseline, it would be something like 68.3 or something. And then I would know that that wasn't the placeholder baseline. It was an actual number.
Thanks.
Right, because Jesse, just to make sure we're all understanding this, what Zero Tool is doing, right, is it's taking the national data baseline and then it's sharpening it by zip code, right?
By zip code and by project area. I've noticed the baseline EUI will change based off of how large your project is, at least for K-12 work. I know that's true.
So hopefully, Matthew, we gave you some options for this year's reporting, and that next year's reporting, you guys are calculating everything as you go, so it doesn't pile up and is something you have to do in the first quarter of the new year. Next question. Is it preferred that all projects use zero tool for setting a baseline or other baselines acceptable? Does a variety of baselines across a portfolio complicate any of the analysis? There are other baselines that can be used. There is a place to say that. I will say that we did base the 2030 commitment program on baseline being 2003 CBEX, which is what zero tool is calculating for. So that is our preferred path. It does make things more normalized and it works. But, you know, if you do have a baseline based on something else, you know, there are options. Let's see if we can get there, because then you need to say what it is. Like, lost on how we get there.
I run into this issue explaining to some project teams because we often have reduction targets from a baseline that our energy code defines, or reduction targets from a baseline that LEED defines. This is a different baseline. This is a national data set baseline that we're all supposed to use, so that depending on what your energy code is or what your target is for some other certification like LEED, we're all using the same, generally the same baseline. So that's the reason for still using that old 2003 CBEX data, is that we've been using that same baseline the entire time. We're not changing the baseline every time we measure our project's energy use.
And I think the only two use types that 2003 CBEX leaves us hanging, right, are labs, and you could use labs 21, and then data centers, and nobody has a good answer for that one yet, because, you know, data centers were so different back in 2003, and we don't have a good data set for that. So, you know, Jesse was just alluding to those other baselines. Like, we have, if it's a code equivalent, it doesn't really matter because it's a ratio, right? We have like a couple data centers that are having energy modeling for LEED, and we're using the LEED baseline as our baseline since CBEX leaves you hanging. That's not going to show our project as improved as it could be, because that's, you know, based on ASHRAE 2013, not ASHRAE 2003, but it's the only data we have. So that's, you know, what we're doing.
All right, so I have gotten to the little place where you can put a different baseline. So this is baseline based on 2003 CBEX, which for our database is taking it from zero tool, and you can put in a different baseline here. So if you wanted to say 45, but then you need to tell us what your source is. And that way we can keep that in mind. But our preference is definitely zero tool and 2003 CBEX. But we do have this alternative path. I do think within your own portfolio, it also could get confusing if you're calculating reductions from different things. It kind of is not necessarily an apples to apples comparison. All right, so the DDX can derive a baseline and target for an individual project, but won't auto-populate the baselines and targets for multiple projects at a time. Can this be added to functionality in the future? Maybe. I mean, it would be that we would allow that certain fields within a bulk import could be blank, and then it would be auto-populated upon upload. That's something we can talk to the developers about and see. But I do think, you know, to Daniel's point, most people who are doing bulk import are doing that work as they go through the project process, and are collecting that information for themselves too. So, but we can definitely talk about that as a potential future update. Can I explain what the placeholder item is intended for? It is listed in the bulk import guide. Yes, that is brand new this year. So apparently some of our super bulk import users that have lots and lots and lots of projects sometimes put in placeholder EUIs when they upload their overall portfolio. So they might have placeholder EYs that are like 666, and some of them don't remember to go back and fix that later. So placeholder text is for some firms where, you know, you want to do your bulk import, you want to put everything in, but they're identifying certain projects that you need to go back to. So within that, if you are a firm that does that and you do a bulk import, when you go to this manage projects folder, you can turn on this placeholder field. And so if you did have yeses, so if you put in a big bulk import and you said yes to a few projects, you can sort by this. Wherever it said yes, you can then make sure that you go back and update those particular projects before you submit your portfolio. Really trying to make sure that we're calling out those projects that might be incorrect, and allowing those firms to make sure that they're updating that information. Again, this is really for quality control and making sure that we have the best, most accurate data within the DDX versus placeholder numbers that people, you know, when you have 500 projects or something, you know, some might get missed. So hopefully we are trying to limit the amount of times where that might happen. So if you don't use it, just say no and ignore it. Like, that is not a default column here. You don't need to have it here. If it is, it's one of those things where if it's not for you, just say no and ignore it from here on out. But for the people who do use it, it is very handy. Do we have any other questions on bulk import?
While you're on this screen, Melissa, can we review the mark complete function, right? So that button is appearing for projects that are shown by phase that they're done, right? If people don't click that in the DDX before they submit their data for the year by, you know, March 31st, does that mean that those numbers are still calculated in their total? And like once you click that, it pulls it out of the total?
Wait, can you say that again?
What is the functionality of the mark complete button on the screen, and when are people supposed to make sure they do that? Like, should they do that before they submit their portfolio, for example?
If you completed a project during this calendar year, you can do that. If it has a data point for 2023, I do believe it, and you know, for the reporting year, it will still be included in your portfolio. If you do not have any data point for 2023 and you mark it as complete, it will not be included in your portfolio because you do not have a 2023 data point. So it really matters more for your organization to have those marked complete. For your portfolio, it matters when you have data actually, or an updated portfolio. So if you kind of put in your last construction administration for July, and then you mark the project as complete, it would be included in your 2023 portfolio. But if it's something you just didn't mark complete last year and you did not add an additional data point for 2023, it would not be there.
So it's really just for our own tracking of projects. It doesn't affect the data. The data is what the data is.
The data is what the data is. This is really for you to make sure that you can see what you're looking at and organize projects for yourself. That's why there's also an on hold. So, you know, I think we've all had a project at some point that goes dormant for a couple of years and then comes back later when there's funding, usually. Any other questions, confusing things?
I have a quick question. I downloaded all of the data from last year into the spreadsheet to start updating and having people confirm that things are updated. And when speaking of baselines, looking at the baseline, there's several projects that are PK-12 schools, and it says under baseline source, it says using tool, and then it has a crazy number like 1.2. Is that, do you think in the past year someone has done something terribly wrong when inputting data? Should I update it and use the CBES baseline of 75, or do you have any recommendation for that?
Why don't we connect offline and take a look at that and see what's happening? Because that does seem like not correct if it's a whole building project. My first question was, is there some chance that this is an interior only project? And that the data it's pulling is an LPD instead of an EUI, which would make more sense. But if you want to send me any information via email, and I can take a look at that and see what's happening.
Okay.
That doesn't sound right. I will
No.
also say the download spreadsheet does not necessarily match the upload spreadsheet. So there's a fair amount of like configuration that you would need to do, which is also on the 2024 development to-do list, because that the level of edits you're going to have to do to your spreadsheet is too much. But yeah, you can't download it and then upload it again. So that is a bummer and a fail on our part.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. So I guess we handled all of the bulk import questions. If anyone has any general 2030 questions that they want to pop in here for the next 5 minutes, let us know.
I actually had a really quick question.
Sure.
So my firm, we were trying to confirm the actual deadline for the DDX data, and I wasn't able to find a hard court date. So I was wondering if you guys could speak to that.
March 31st.
March 31st. Lovely. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Always, always March 31st.
Okay, great. So it's always the same. Perfect.
Which apparently is also Sunday and Easter. So.
Oh, yay. Okay.
So hopefully you're not actually doing it on March 31st, but yeah. That date is never moving, or at least not
Great.
with me.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anything else?